You could see a lot of it where they switch over, where they're, but To Catch a Thief, the, you could see the film, you see the south of France, and then all of a sudden you're into the villa and you see a set being built. That's where he's most comfortable, where he can bring the cameras up. And I learned a lot about isolation with him, how to isolate a person, and all these things in composition that they don't teach you in art school, that they don't teach you in any university. So it's certain things that he picked up, you know, from the silent films in England. And one of the best movies I think he directed is a movie called Frenzy. I've actually seen it about 20 times to get to shots of the bridge, of Tower Bridge, where they're zooming down, and that was at the time when they didn't have Steadicam. And they would keep that thing really rolling and actually keeping that camera steady. That's very tricky to do. I mean, Steadicam is very new, and it wasn't around when Hitchcock was making film.
So were there any other directors?
Yes, there were. Otto Preminger was one, and he was tough. He was a tough director, but here he directs, and I have to direct him for the portrait.
Right.
So it's quite difficult, where he's expounding on Dubuffet and all the abstract art that he collected. Yet I said, if you really like that, why don't you have Dubuffet paint your portrait rather than me? I'm painting your portrait. And then we get into like fighting with horns, and he'd say, oh, you like the artwork my grandma liked. And I'd say, you like the artwork my great-grandfather liked. And it'd go on and on and on and on and on. And I really liked the guy, and he would listen, because he was an actor. And you know, he always played a Nazi. Many times he liked playing that role. He's born in Austria. I don't know if it's Vienna, but he never wanted to go back there to do any kind of filming. What I liked about him is that, you know, Laura, I think he directed Laura, and here's a film that, you know, that I would be inspired by and painted. Another one was The Man with the Golden Arm. And it didn't dawn on me. I didn't think, because I wasn't doing my homework. What I do a lot of times, I'll read, and then I say, why am I doing that? Get everything from him. Get everything from that person. Let him tell you, then do the homework afterwards. So that's what I did with him. And then I forgot that he did a film that affected my life. And it could affect all our children in the world's life. The Man with the Golden Arm was a wonderful film. I went to the movies. I went to the Majestic Theater in Manhattan, and it was all alone. I must have been 7 years old. Parents get arrested for that today. The thing is, I went to the movies, and I went to see, it was a quarter to see this movie, and it was directed by Otto Preminger, and it was about Frank Sinatra, who was a drummer, and he was a heroin addict. And I watched him in the movie go what they call cold turkey to get off the heroin. That frightened me. I would say anything with drugs, even prescription drugs, frightened me. But I would never, ever get involved with anything with drugs, ever. No smoking marijuana, nothing, ever. That was it. That movie turned me around to stay away from any narcotics. And my third sitting is when I told Mr. Preminger about that. I said, you know, I got to tell you something, Mr. Preminger. You know, your movie, The Man with the Golden Arm, was something that affected my life. He got teary-eyed about the whole thing, you know? I said, that movie should be a training film for children today. Parents should show it to their children. And everyone I tell that to, all the parents that show it to their children, they look at their response to their children. Their children are frightened of drugs. Wow. So it does help.
That was his purpose when he was making the movie, right?
I think so. I think that was his purpose. I don't know who wrote the piece. I really don't. Yeah.
Gene Kelly.
Gene Kelly was he's just a friend. He became a very close friend. I would write to him, he would write to me, and then when we first met, it's like we knew each other. He lived on Rodeo Drive. And I did about 15 portraits of Mr. Kelly. And he was from Yorktown, which is Pittsburgh.
Right.
And Mr. Kelly, the painting that I did of him burned down in his house. He lost everything. Picasso's, Maricassettes. My artwork went up in flame with a lot of, great painters. But that's a very sad thing. But I told Mr. Kelly that I had the drawings, that eventually I'll be able to do the same painting, and probably it'll be in a museum one day. And I painted a man by the name of Fred Kelly. And, excuse me, I forgot to tell you, Gene Kelly, not only being a great actor, great dancer, great singer, also a great director. He directed great plays and the Flower Drum Song, just wonderful things. And he was able to choose talent like Leslie Caron, who we found at the Paris Opera with the Paris Ballet Company. But his brother Fred Kelly was a teacher of dance, was also in one movie with him that I know of. And Fred is actually responsible for teaching John Travolta, was the first teacher of John Travolta in dance.
Wow.
So that's where, and that was in the Inglewood area, Inglewood, New Jersey.
Oh, and actually I see Marcel Marceau on the list.
Yes, Marcel Marceau, I worked with for 2 years.
Did he talk?
A lot. Marcel Marceau talked a lot, and he talked and talked and talked. And Marcel Marceau was not only involved in mime, he was also involved with creation of making his body become a piece of sculpture. I did paint him in mime. I painted him in character in Bip, but I also painted him as Marcel Marceau, and that's what pleased him because no one ever did that, and that's the way he wanted to be portrayed. So he's passed away recently, and what we're going to do probably work with his family is to get the painting into a museum in France, and to have the painting of him as Marcel Marceau, the person, and then another one as Marcel Marceau as Bip. But he was just a wonderful person to work with because he traveled so much too. He was on the road all the time in trunks, all these trunks in his room. And back when he was posing in 1974, they didn't have an iPod, and they'd have a little portable, he had his little portable record player that he'd play 33s on. And I thought that was fascinating that he could take a little thing like that around. You know, it was this portable little unit, which is probably very expensive at the time.
Cute.
Today, just plug in your iPod. It's a
Right.
lot better, you know. But the big trunks that would come through. And he said, well, you'll be doing a lot of this traveling too. And well, I did. And he'd be in one part of the world, I'd be in another, he'd be calling me up. And he did one movie where it was as Marcel Marceau, it wasn't as Bip, the character. He does talk as the character Bip. Do you know what movie that is?
No. What movie?
That's in Silent Movie. And he says one word, no. They want him to talk, and the whole movie's silent. And it's a Mel Brooks movie. And they call him up, and he says no. And they ask him, what did he say? What did he say? Because you're reading the lines like a silent movie. He says, I don't speak French. It's great, though. It's a great. The man said he was 84 when he died. I think he was 94. I mean, he was around forever. I mean, he was on the Cook with Fran and Ollie show. He was on these old shows, you know. He's been around a long time. So but he was wonderful. I mean, when I was painting him, I mean, he was up there in age.
Well, we've talked a lot about artists and filmmakers, and I see you've painted a portrait of a country western singer.
I painted many country western singers. I was given a commission by the Grand Ole Opry, which is owned by National Life Insurance Company. WSM was their affiliate, which was NBC affiliate. And what they did was gave me a commission to do 17 portraits.
Wow.
And so I did 17 portraits, and I would go between painting a country person, a country singer, which is some of the pioneers of our country, of singers, which, you know, I was taught that their singing comes from England, Ireland, and Scotland, and that's where these ballads come from, and that's where their style comes from. That's why people say, oh, it's big in England, but it's where this music comes from. The steel guitar and developing all this type of thing, that was developed from this country, yes. But I painted a lot of the Hank Snow from Canada, Ernest Tubb, and now Bill Monroe, which is now becoming, I didn't know how important it was until Lauren Perucci pointed out to me, you know how important Bill Monroe, I said he was important when I painted him, but I don't know globally. There's
Right.
millions and millions and millions of people that follow bluegrass music.
Wow.
Paul McCartney, he met Bill Monroe, it was his idol to meet Bill
Wow.
Monroe. So the Bill Monroe painting right now is being put into museums.
Wow.
The prints of the Bill Monroe painting. But I did quite a few paintings of him. I just didn't do one. But what was unique about that is I would fly to New York, and then I would paint Arthur Rubinstein, playing classical. So my head was going from classical to country to classical to country. Yeah, and in some, as you said, you know, people that if they didn't pose from life sitting, one was Hank Williams. In order to do Hank Williams, I studied a lot of film, and then I found a person that had his costume, that had his actual clothes.
Right.
He used it as his costume, and had his hat and his guitar. So I went to Montgomery, Alabama, and went to the grave and said, you know, I wish I could dig you up, Hank, but I can't do that. So I went to Georgia and Alabama to find his relatives and found his first cousin looked just like him. Called up my friend, Jim Owens, who's a producer today, who did this Hank Williams show, and got Hank Williams' clothes, dressed his cousin in the clothes, looked just like him. Well, it's his blood, too. It's his blood
Right,
cousin, and
right.
had him pose as as Hank Williams. So when I delivered my portrait to WSM and said, "This is the," he said, "How'd you do this portrait?" I said, "Well, you know, I have my ways." I said a lot of prayers and got him to pose, and that's how I worked, and that's how I would generally work. There was Uncle Dave Menken, and Dave Menken was dead, so his son looked like him and had his dad's clothes. So fortunately, I was able to do that with him, get him to pose look like his dad, and put the banjo in his hand. I was so happy when Hank Snow's still alive, and you know, Bill Monroe's alive, and I could travel with him, and Ernest Tubb was alive, so Minnie Pearl was alive. So I'm glad that they were there, because then you could, you know, it's so much easier to do a posthumous portrait.
Yeah.
It's hard to do Moses when he's not around.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you ask the question like, how did Michelangelo do God?
Yeah.
You know, you just come up with in your brain. That's what he looks like.
That's right. Well, we are here with artist Kenneth Harry, and we'll be right back after this quick break.
Don't touch that dial. Welcome back to the top of the morning. We're at the top of the World Trade Center. I'm Just Kumar,
And I'm Lil Ree.
and we're here with Kenneth. We're having a great time.
We
We're having
are.
a great
Yes,
time
we are.
talking about all this art. Now, you know, one of the things that I found interesting was we were talking about some of the pieces that you've done, and I heard that you did a portrait that's nine feet tall. Is that right?
Yes.
See, a lot of people think. I mean, I always think of a portrait as being, you know, one that fits on a wall, that's just a regular wall. But 9 feet tall. Was it Paul Robeson?
Yeah, Paul Robeson.
Robeson.
Paul Robeson was a scholar, an African-American scholar.
Yeah.
And he was graduated Rutgers, the highest cum, went to Columbia, picked up a law degree, and goes off to England to sing opera and to appear in films. And I was given a commission to paint Paul Robeson by a friend of mine who grew up thinking he was Paul Robeson. And he went to Rutgers, and he went to Rutgers Law School. And his name is Alan Gums, and the Gums family of Anguilla. So Alan said, "Listen, I want you to paint Paul Robeson." I said, "Fine, you know, well, we'll figure out what we can do and how to do this." So I better hurry up and get to Paul Robeson. It was 1973 at the time. I call up the Robeson family and make arrangements to go to Philadelphia, and I meet with Mr. Robeson, and Mr. Robeson doesn't look too, I don't know how I'm going to do a monumental portrait of him because he's very sick. He's dying of arteriosclerosis. So what happened was I said, well, I'll make the drawings and I'll keep it in my brain that he was there. I have his spirit. Wonderful man. Unbelievably beautiful human being. I mean, this is the Paul Robeson. What a gentleman and what a great scholar. And so meticulous the way he spoke. So, well, this was on Walnut Street in Philadelphia at his house. So then I told Al, look, I had him pose, and but the problem is I want to make a monument of him. I said he just doesn't look that good, you know. And so a year went by and he dies. I said, uh-oh, we got a problem. So I said, I don't know what to do with this. I said, so we just let it hang in there for a while. Well, there was a show on Broadway with James Earl Jones called Paul Robeson. This is great. So I said, we'll give it time, you know, and I'll get a hold of Paul Robeson and James Earl Jones as Paul Robeson, and see what we can do. Maybe I can get him to pose as Paul Robeson. The show closes. Paul Robeson Jr. doesn't like it. Gil Noble, they close it up. I said, oh, lost that one. So time goes by, and I still don't know how to make him to become a powerful Paul Robeson, to get the power of this human being, the monument portrait of Paul Robeson. And I read that the show opens up in London at Her Majesty's Theatre. Well, I'm in London, and I'm going off. Well, I was living in Paris and going off to London. And I was working with someone there and on a painting. And I said, you know, I'll give it a crack. Maybe I can get a hold of James Earl Jones. I'll leave a note at Her Majesty's Theatre. I left him a note. I said, listen, I painted Paul Robeson. I made drawings of him for a painting, but I need to do a monument. James Earl Jones calls me up, invites me to the show. He says, stay, watch the show as much as you want. I watched the show. Unbelievable, great actor. Oh, didn't miss a line. I don't know how he could study so many, 2 hours and just, he makes you cry through the whole, he makes you laugh. The beginning of the play is a bronze of Paul Robeson by Antonio Salemi, which is Paul Robeson's best friend. Wow, now I get James Earl Jones to pose as Paul Robeson, but it's not Paul Robeson, but I get the manner of Paul Robeson, the way I want it. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I have Paul Robeson, and he doesn't look that good. Then I have James Earl Jones, but there's a bust of him, a bronze. Now, where can I find this sculptor, and is he still alive? Can I get to do this? Can I get to do this bust and include the bust? So it so happened, one of my very close friends and mentor is best friends with Antonio Salemi. He said, oh, I know Tony. Tony's about 85 years old. So I get a hold of Tony Salemi. He lives in Easton, Pennsylvania. And, I mean, he is like Paul Robeson's best friend. Paul Robeson would pose nude for him. And so I go to his studio, and I say, oh, my God, could I get one of these bronzes? I want to buy one, blah, blah, blah. I buy one of the bronzes, the Paul Robeson. And Tony and I get to be friends, and he tells me everything about him. With that bronze, with Paul Robeson, that bronze, and James Earl Jones posing, we make the painting. I make the painting of Paul Robeson, which is, which was wonderful. It was a wonderful